I like that you taught us a lot about God.
Well, I like that that you taught us about what God said and what Jesus said about how you should kind of be like a child.
That Jesus sent a little boy, like you had to change to be like the little boy. That way you're the best in heaven. Like if you won't be sent in heaven if you don't change.
That adults can also be scared, and you can just and you can tell them that it's okay to say that you're scared, or if they need help and they don't understand it, like kids can say, hello, I can't do this. But adults really think that they can do it and they don't want anyone to know.
That most of them have lessons and you can use those lessons to do things.
Because kids can more understand it. Instead of just saying it, they actually tell you a lot about it by using stories. Yeah, because then I could really visualize what he's saying and what he's doing and how he's doing it. I liked when went on the fair, when you were at the fair and your sister was taller than you so she can go on the ride but you couldn't. When you were a little kid and you had to stay up, your sister had to stay up later than you.
I remember that adults aren't always perfect and sometimes they get scared, like kids do, but they don't want to show it.
Sometimes you're too short, so you can't do a lot of things like other tall people can do. You're not strong enough like bigger kids are.
I learned that kids can teach grown-ups things that grown-ups don't have to always be teaching kids. Like if your parents can't speak the language in a country, you can teach them how to speak it. And my mom only speaks Spanish, so I have to help her.
Because my mom, she goes to this school and she has to do homework online, but it's really tricky for her to do homework, so she's just trying to keep it in, that she doesn't really understand it. I can probably tell her that it's okay to tell others that you can't do it.
I'm gonna tell my mom to relax and have a little fun.
As a preacher, when you preach, you're trying to communicate a message. And so you have to think about who is listening and how they're going to be able to best receive your message. You're basing whatever you're preaching on scripture and on stories, on what's going on in the community that you're preaching in and what's going on in the minds and hearts of the people that you're preaching to, trying to relate those all together. You're going to want to read the gospel many times, pray with it, think about it, and then think about what the children might be learning about or thinking about in their typical day. It's great if you're preaching in a classroom like I was, it's great to know what they had just been learning about. So in that classroom, they were just learning about bullying. They were just learning about also identity was a unit that they were working on. So I know that, so I'm going to try to tie that in because it's using a vocabulary that they're already working with. If this is for a specific class or a specific group, I call who's ever in charge of them, whoever works with them day to day, and I talk to them about what's going on in the classroom. What are they learning about? Has there been any problems lately or ideas that have come around that they might need to hear a story or a lesson about? Sometimes the teachers have requests about what they want you to preach about. Then I try to find an appropriate scripture passage to use for that day. And sometimes we just use the scripture passage from the day, and I try to relate it to what the needs are in the classroom. Everybody likes stories. Stories are easy to engage with, and children especially are used to hearing stories. That's the way that they're used to learning lessons. probably up through middle school, even up through high school, we learn better when it's through a story. And with children, they love characters, they love to know history, they love to know dynamic traits of people. If you have a personal story, they'll listen to that. They want to know about you because they want to know how they can relate to you. I love to use stories because images really help children to learn. Images are, kids are really used to using their imagination, and it's great for them to exercise their imagination. So when you're telling them a story, they'll get the lesson better because first they'll know it through the characters and then they can apply it to their life. So if you can do both within your preaching, it's really effective for children. Children engage better if you are working through all of their senses. I like to sometimes ask them, sometimes I'll bring in a candle if we're doing sacraments, and I'll light the candle and I'll show it to them so they can look at it, they can smell it. I'll bring in chrism sometimes if we're talking about baptism. I'll have them smell that, have them look at it, see how it looks. They'll pass it around, and then you can tell them how special it is, and they really take it seriously. I've had a couple of experiences where I've had the students take off their shoes, and when they come into the prayer space or the space where we're doing the prayer service, and I'll say, this is sacred ground, this is a sacred space, we're going to take off our shoes. Kids engage better when there's a sensory aspect to it. And so that's why story is important, but also a prop or a costume or a voice. I like to, when I'm telling stories, whether it's about me or a member of their class or the teacher, I like to tell the stories and do the voices and do impressions. As dramatic as you can be, as comfortable as you are with that, go the distance. If you can, take a risk, put yourself out there, be a little vulnerable, do a funny voice. Children and families engage better with that. I think all congregations do. I love to use dialogue when I'm preaching, whether or not it's for children or families or congregations in general. Asking questions, make sure that they're listening. So with children, they have shorter attention spans. So you're not just going to be making it really dynamic, you're also going to involve them as much as possible. So I love to ask questions that they know how to answer too. It's really important that you're not asking hard questions or questions that might embarrass them if they don't know the answer. But yeah, you always want to make sure that you're involving them and engaging them with questions. Look them in the eye, call on them. If you know their names, use their names. That's super important. There are a lot of good children's versions of scripture out there. Depending on the age group of the children you're working with, I kind of prefer to use the scripture that I would be reading from, or the scripture that they'd hear at church. Because that way, if you're reading them that story and then they hear it at church, they're not hearing something different. I like them to be able to go to church on Sunday, and when they hear the priest preach that, or proclaim that same gospel, they're able to say, I know that story. I understand what that story means, whereas they might just check out. It also is a great catechetical opportunity if you're using the actual scripture passage that you would typically hear at a mass. It gives you opportunity in your preaching to pick apart some of the words that they might not know, explain and teach what Jesus is talking about or what that might have looked like. It's really important that the kids understand the vocabulary of it. When you're telling a story, when you're preaching, you can break it down for them. You don't have to do that with the scripture necessarily. You can if they're very young. Third graders can handle the regular scripture. They understood it. They might need a little help with some of the words, but they'll be fine. You have to respect children at the age that they're at. A lot of preachers and teachers and adults in general, when they talk to children, they talk down to them, or they feel the need to dumb everything down. You don't have to do that. Sometimes you have to use simpler language. Sometimes you have to paint a picture in a different way that you would paint it for an adult congregation. But find out what you would say to adults. Find a way to say that to children. That same scripture is being used for children as being used for adults. It has the same oomph, it has the same power behind it. find a way to communicate that to a child in a respectful way. Children know when they're being spoken down to, and they won't receive it as well as if it's given to them that in a way that shows that you care about them and that you respect them and that you think that they're smart, because they are. They're smart people, and they will often give you so much more back than when you engage them in a dialogue. They will give you a lot of information that you didn't have when you went into it.
Wow.